Hey folks, this week we'll be talking about our favorite player counts. Stick around.
You're listening to the Beans and Dice podcast, a podcast about how we game.
That's right, I'm Mitchell.
And I'm Wayne.
And this is the Beans and Dice podcast, a podcast about
how we game.
How we game. Well, Wayne, I will say that the gaming front here in Louisiana has not been quite as hot as it was last week. Remember I told you I played game every day? And maybe about 50% of that. Still a lot of games played in the past week for me. And man, my list that I have to sort for my top 20 this month is going to be crazy. There have been so many titles I've played this month for the first time in 2023. But I guess we still got a few more days till that. What about you? You played anything fun recently?
Yeah, we had a game day this past Saturday, so I got a couple of games in there. A couple of new first-time plays of games, which was nice. I think I'm up to like 20 or 25 unique plays this month. So, but what's interesting, I looked at the list and there's only a couple that merely have a chance of making my top 20. It's getting harder and harder to break into the top 20. But
I found that last month. Last month, I think I only added one, which was Twilight Inscription.
Yeah, I think I'm going to save. We're recording this for release on Wednesday. We always push the live show Thursdays. I'm going to save one game for Thursday because I know Rob's probably going to want to talk about it too. But spoiler alert: the Target exclusive Sushi Go Dim Sum Fun game, whatever it is. We'll talk about that Thursday, and well worth $20.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. Was it worth it? And
I'm picking up my copy today. I went out. I bought it. So, but the game I want to talk about is I had a first play of Quacks of Quedlinburg, which
first play of Quacks.
Yeah,
wow.
I never played it. I got it for Father's Day. That's a very positive one. I want to go a little negative because we played this game. Moonrakers. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I've heard of it. Nick really liked it, I think.
Maybe. Yeah, I think so. It's a 2020 release. IV Games, Lunar Saloon is the artist, and Max Anderson is the designer. It's actually rated 7.8 on BGG, which is pretty high. A young kid came to the game day, or teenager, and he brought it with him. And I'm like, oh, that game looks cool, and I wanted to get him included because it was mostly adults, so post 21-year-olds there. I said, well, let's play this game.
That's a tasteful way to say that.
Post older people, yeah. I said, pop this game down. It looks really cool. The art on the box is gorgeous. I mean, it's just really gorgeous. And he starts breaking it out, and again, the artwork and production value of the game is really nice. Just beautiful metal coins, and the cards are the color is really cool. It's not this like super bright colors, but it's just beautiful colors. The game looked amazing. The kid's teaching us this game, and Dan from Your Turn had played it before. He's like, oh, I played this before. It's very, standard deck building. You draw 5 cards, play the cards in your hand, you have a discard pile, buy new cards, and the whole idea is you go on missions, and you have to play your cards to go on missions, to complete missions, to get like victory points, basically. You have the first one to 10 victory points wins. The twist is you can ask for help, so you can get people to help you. And then negotiate. Well, off of that card, I want some of the points, or I want some of the coins, or whatever. And that person could help you, or they could just choose to screw you over and not actually help you finish the mission. So it was a good game. I didn't like the length of it. It took us a little over 2 hours, just about 2 hours for 4-player. And we really sped up the end of the game. It got to the point where we were hitting around the 2-hour mark, and we were kind of done with the game, and the typical king making of like, well, I'll just help you do this because I want to end the game. So it was to me, it's kind of like your standard deck builder. So, the DC deck builder or any other deck builder where you have your kick and your punch and your weakness, and then you have the 10 cards and you have 5 and you're building the deck. So there's really no iteration there with elements of Munchkin thrown into it. Because you're like, kicking in the door and you're fighting the monster and you're asking for help, and they can either screw you over or not help you, and you can lose points. So like there's like hazards, and if you roll hazards and you don't defend them, you lose points. So Sam, she was like up. We were all like 6, 7, 8 points. We went on a mission, and she failed it so badly she went from like 7 to like 2. I'm like, oh, that's rough, right?
That's
basically you're out of the game at that point. And so it was an interesting game, but I would definitely pass on it as far as the try by deny. I would deny it because it really doesn't do anything new in the realm of deck building. But I think the added part of that Munchkin-like, where you can kind of screw people over and it's first to 10 so you can get king making at the end, kind of turned me off on it. I would probably play it again at maybe 3 instead of 4. And see how it goes, but it was a fun game. But it was definitely where I'm like, I don't see a reason to own this one. So that's Moonrakers.
So it sounds kind of like it had some unique things about it, but it overstayed its welcome, essentially.
Overstayed its welcome, and I think that Munchkin-esque, that's for lack of a better term, that like take that or screw your neighbor over negotiation thing works well, but if it's taking too long, people will get anxious and just try to either king make or mesh over just to mesh over. Gotcha. So I didn't know if I liked that very much.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about this one. I've seen it on the internet and stuff. So good to know. It's maybe more of a try than a buy if ever I come across it. I always say I'll play anything once, but no, I appreciate the feedback on that, so I can know. For me, I think I'll highlight Guild of Merchant Explorers. This was it yesterday or 2 days ago was BJ's birthday. We went over to his office and we played some games. Played a lot of games. This one is one that BJ was really hot on last year at Dice Tower East, and just for some reason we didn't connect to be able to play it together. He did the elevator pitch best. It's basically like a roll and write or a flip and fill without actually writing at all. Have you played this one?
Yes, I have.
You're nodding.
Okay, a couple times. Yeah,
it's great. So it's AEG. For those listening, if you don't know, I mean, it's basically it's a map, and you're trying to explore out on the map, but there's different, I guess, like different journeys. So between the journeys, you don't want to have to restart back from base. So you're trying to start these new settlements further out, so you can start further out and get to the better things farther away from home. But the cool thing is, well, there's two things. First of all, there's a very limited number of actions. I think it's like 5 or 6 actions that tell you where you can mark on your map, which you use cubes instead of writing. And the board, as you flip that action, you cover it on the board so you know what's left in the deck to kind of plan ahead. That's the first cool thing. But the second cool thing is it starts very symmetric, at least if you're playing the base game, and gets more and more asymmetric. So they have these cards. There's 4 different rounds. So in the first round, there's a 1 card. Whenever that comes out, you get 2 random like power cards. You pick one of them, but it's not just a one-time use. You keep that next to your board, and in every subsequent round, every time that 1 card comes out again, you get to do your power that nobody else has. Then you add a new one in the second and the third round, and in the fourth round, you don't add a new one, but there's a card that says do any one of your powers. So I just thought it was unique. Like a lot of games start off, hey, we're all starting off differently, but we have the same goal. And while we always had the same goal in this game, I just thought it was cool that we started off with all the same things and then slowly diversified, which I guess a lot of games are like that when you think about it. But whenever it comes to like a flip and fill, roll and write kind of game, I thought it was pretty unique.
Yeah, this one's really cool. I like it's sort of like aspects of Kingdom Builder where you're placing out and branching out to various scoring positions on the map, right? But then brings in sort of a diversification and certain special powers, and you can see a lot of different ways to score too. There's like getting to the monoliths and getting cities and towns built, and I remember the one game we played at Your Turn Con. There was a kind of a center island, and people went off the island in different directions. It was kind of interesting to see how people built differently as you went through the game. So it's definitely a lot of fun. It's kind of very pretty. Like the artwork is nice, but it's very like muted. Like it's very beigeish, white.
Yeah,
beige,
I mean that doesn't bother
tans.
me. I know some people it may, but
So the aesthetics are nice though. It seems like it's a nice game. It's very like good looking, but it's not like overdone. I think that's probably a good thing is to say is it's very understated. It's kind of like old school cartographers, right? Like what it might look like if you were creating these maps with or parchment and pen, later, earlier.
It makes sense. If we're thinking thematically, if you're making this map as you explore, you wouldn't be making it pretty. You would just be making it in a utilitarian way, like to map it out, bring it back to the queen, and let her pay an artist to make it pretty.
Right. And I think it's got it's got some variability too. There's like a base game, and then there's some additional cards so you can do variability there.
Yeah, there's different maps as well. You don't all have to start with the exact same map.
Right. Yeah. So it's a fun game. It's one that I would definitely I would not turn down playing again. I don't know if I would buy it, but it's definitely a try. Or like you bust it out, I'll play it. Like I'll probably play it at Dice Tower East. Someone's playing it. I think we'll probably get that played again.
Yeah, I like it. Lately, it's been really hard to get me to shuck out money for any brand new game just because stuff's so expensive. But I mean, I think if I saw it on sale, I would definitely pick it up. I enjoy it. It's a buy for me.
Yeah.
Man, honestly, I think BJ needs to. We need to start paying him because every week the game I'm talking about is one that he taught me. So he's an unofficial sponsor of the Beans and Dice podcast, or vice versa. Who knows?
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So this week we are going to be going. I don't know why I said going like that. We're going to be talking about player count, and there's a lot of different avenues we can kind of take with this discussion. And I just want to open it up by talking about what our favorite player count is. And I think it's going to be a big asterisk because I'm assuming both of us are going to say it depends. But I'll just start off by saying I much prefer smaller player counts, just because you guys know how I am. I like to zoom through, get a bunch of games in. Whenever you start adding more people, that's more distractions, more thinking time. I'll say probably 3 is my favorite, obviously, depending on the game. The problem with 2-player is sometimes, I don't know, it's just better to have a little bit more interaction than just me against you. 3 can sometimes be a problem, though, because, you can do like king making or just gang up on the one person that's in the lead. Obviously, if there's a team game, I don't like games where it's like, well, this is a team game, but if you don't have enough people, just like make uneven teams. If it's a team game, I'd prefer to have even numbers. But yeah, in general, I'd say 2 or 3 is my go-to. What about you, Wayne?
Well, other than I would say 4, 4-player games, and so I want to play most games at 4, and part of that is you don't have that 2-on-1 ever in a game where you have 2 people kind of ganging up on one. And I think, you have a lot more ability for turnover in a lot of games. I think I play a lot of like your classic Euros, worker placement, those kind of things. 4 is where it starts to get kind of tight in a lot of the worker placement games where decisions really matter. But also if there's a market or some kind of card deck or some kind of mechanism where things refresh, I think 4 tends to trigger that refresh a little bit better than at 3, but also, you got to be careful because if I'm waiting for that card, it's probably not going to make it back to me, or that spot probably not going to make it back to me. So you have to make some sort of faster decision making, I guess is what they're saying. So, the classic Euro answer, 4-player game, I like 4, right? And I think, they go, 3 is good. I 3, and then 2-player I like. But I don't like a lot of the modern games that are saying, "Oh, it plays 2 to 6." No, it doesn't. Really, it's a 3, 4, or 5-player game, mostly 3 or 4.
Right.
But I do like a lot of 2-player games. I mean, my friend Kevin and I, at least on BGA, we have probably 20 different 2-player games that we're just spamming. And when we get together for game days, I'll bring those, and if people are late or if a game finishes early, I'll have 2-player games that I can just crank out of Hanamakoji or Jaipur or Targi or something like that, which I really love. So I like those 2-player games, and I technically like a lot of 2-player games designed for 2 players. I
think I'm the opposite of that because I understand what you're saying where, it's really a 4-player game, but they're saying you play it 2, et cetera, et cetera. But the opposite is, let's say it's a 2-player game I really, really like, and I've got 4 people at the table. Then I can't play that game. Unless it's something crazy. Okay, like Star Wars Rebellion is a 2-player game, and it's like you can play with 4 players if you just basically like split up the tasks. Like, no, that's still 2-player. But so like Seven Wonders Duel and Splendor Duel, all those kind of things, I've never really gotten into those just because like I'm very rarely playing with just one other person, and I don't want to, paint myself into that corner. Also, but at the same time, I understand where you're coming from, that if you say it's really for 2 players and it's really for 4, then you have to make all these kind of concessions. Like, I hate games, I don't want to say hate, but like whenever you have to introduce an AI or something extra to make up for the extra person, which I understand.
You're basically running a 3rd-player person.
Right, I don't want to play a computer. Sorry, I don't want to be a computer, you know what I'm saying? Right. And I'm also having to think about my turns because we've talked about this before. I'm always the person at the table that's doing the upkeep just because I usually don't trust other people. And so it's like I'm having to divide my loyalties between my actual strategy and then doing what the AI or bot's supposed to be doing, like Tiny Epic Vikings or Twilight Inscription, a lot of these games I've played recently. If you're down to 2 players, you have to have that 3rd interaction because that's part of the mechanics of the game, so you have to do something.
Yeah, and that's when you get down to the 2 players. It's just bank out the games that are designed for 2 players. And I think the other thing too is, like, for me, the 2-player games are big. Like if I go on a vacation with my wife, I'll bring a couple 2-player games that we could play. Or like today's her birthday. After we get done with this podcast, we're going out for lunch and spending the afternoon out, and about. I throw in my car. I've got Hanamakoji, Best Little Treehouse, and Smitten, all 2-player games that if we're sitting at a bar hanging out and talking, I can just bust out a game and we'll play it while we're talking. So those kind of things I like. So I like 2 and I like 4, but I think I agree with you a lot of even, and so I like 2, 4, 6 because I think if you get to 6, then on a game day you could play a bigger game that needs 6 players, or you could bust it up and do 2 3s, right? Which I think, and that's also part of of an issue too is I hate when not hate yeah we keep using the word hate, but I dislike when you get to a game day and you get like that 5 or 6 player count and now you're kind of stuck playing a party game or playing certain games that are best at 6. And I'm like, well, that just eliminates a lot of the classic Euros, a lot of the heavy worker placement games. You can't play Dune, you can't play Arnak, you can't play Brass, those kind of games.
But honestly, I wouldn't want to play Brass at 6. Oh my gosh, that
no,
would be
that's what I'm
crazy.
saying. You can't. But convincing the group of 6 to split into two threes is always hard, right? Because then it's like, well, what if your game takes too long and
Right.
I'm like, well. So I think that's part of the problem. Is like it's also like I think player count is also a function of where you're playing. So if you're having a game day, at a game store, it's it can vary because you have a bunch of people there. If you're having a game day at your house, how many people do you invite over? Do you invite just 4, and then you can crank out a bunch? You're playing 4-player, or do you try to get 6 or 8 and have a bunch of different games? So it's always kind of a conversation as far as player count is also dependent upon where and when you're playing.
Yeah, that's true.
So
now, I want to go back to something you mentioned a while ago, and you said the even numbers, and you mentioned a worker placement game, for example, being tight, and I think for me, a lot of people are like, oh, this is a really tight worker placement game. To me, I don't want it to be that tight. Like I like being competitive. At the end of the day, I want to have a little bit of fun too, and not be super stressed if possible. So, of course, I don't want it to be wide open and it's like, oh, there's no challenge whatsoever, but I prefer something more in the middle. So, one game that I will not refuse, but I really don't like playing at 2 players is Viticulture. I love playing Viticulture at odd numbers because the third and fifth player open up the extra action spaces,
Right.
and it gives just a little bit more wiggle room to make it still fun without being like, oh, you can do whatever you want with no consequences.
Yeah, and 4 is a little tight. Sometimes you're fighting space, but the grande worker solves a little bit of that.
Right.
But I think I got to throw it out there. I can't remember the name of the game, but I've heard it. It came out last year, I think, and it advertised a player count of 0. And I'm like, come on, that's just marketing. Like basically it's a game that at that point you're just doing a choose your own adventure, or you're reading a book, or that's an activity. That's not a game, right? So, but that also brings up the idea of like, in last week's podcast, we had mentioned that we talked about replayability or how many times you have to play a game to get good at it. And we sort of made a comment, or I know I made a comment that, a 500 card deck where it's all unique cards is almost more about the marketing and saying like, hey, look at this game. It's got a 500 card deck and you can play it 50 times before you see all the cards. Great. Same thing with player count is like, it's almost like, especially on Kickstarter, like if you don't have a solo variant, if you don't play 2 to 5 or 2 to 6, like people are up in arms. Like it's like the worst thing since sliced bread, the worst thing, not the opposite of that. Sorry, best thing since sliced bread, but the worst thing.
You're mixing metaphors here.
It says, mixing metaphors. It's like bread never got invented. But no, so I don't. Not every game needs it. I think some game companies have said no. It's 2 to 4, or it's it is what it is. We're not going to this desire to have every game have a solo variant, every game play at 2, and every game play at 5 and 6. I get that games are getting expensive, and people may be looking to have a cultivated collection where you need a small number of games that are playable by a ton of people, but you can achieve that with if you have 10 games, you can have 2 2-player games and a couple of games that are 2 to 4, and one party game that can play to 6 to 8. So many games that have solo variants, it's not a very good solo variant, or it's just
And also, it's nothing like the game a lot of the time.
a lot of times, right? Yeah, and even if, like you said, the 2-player variants, if it's a 2-player variant where I have to run a third player, I'm out because I can't keep up with my own stuff and resetting the board and running the third player. I've tried it. Now, like Dune Imperium has a kind of the solo variant where you're playing.
It has
against
the app.
but the app helps. That's huge, right? I don't mind. Like, I think the best 2-player variants have things where you just cover up some of the board, right? Or some spaces aren't available.
Yeah, I don't mind that. But if it's something you have to upkeep throughout the whole game, that's different.
Yeah, I'm out. And I think a lot of times when you get games that are really good at 4, and then you add an expansion that adds a 5th player, it just bogs it down and adds so much time. Like, a game that you can finish in 60 to 90 minutes, you add a 5th player, and it doesn't add just 15 or 20 or 30 minutes more. It adds like a whole nother hour because it just drags the game down. I think that often happens if the game's not initially designed to play fast and quick at that 5 or 6 player count. It just like I will not play Viticulture at 6.
We played at Dice Tower East, man, or Dice Tower Retreat. It took forever. Tom Bassel passed by. It was like, I will never play that game at 6. Y'all are crazy.
There's just some games that you can talk about fantastic, great games that just get bogged down like crazy when you add too many players. And at that point, if you have 5, then somebody go play a 2-player game or a game that's really good at 2, and other people play 3. Find games that are going to last about the same amount of time, and then just keep rotating. Instead of doing that crazy game. But
before we get too far from it, I want to go back real quick to the 0-player game. Do you know how it works?
I don't. I remember hearing about it on podcast, and people were like joking about like, how can you possibly have a 0-player count game? I mean,
I might have to try to research that and figure it out. Maybe we can report back next week or something.
Yeah, on what it is.
Yeah. Okay, the other thing I want to mention, you're mentioning time, and I think that's a big thing. And I think what's really important is you've seen a lot of these publishers going from like just putting an average game time on the box to doing it per player, like 30 minutes per player, 20 minutes per player. And I think that's helpful in helping pick. But also at the same time, I think the publishers can go a step further in doing things that some are already doing and trying to, as much as possible, make games simultaneous or close to simultaneous turns. Honestly, whenever I think of games that are better at bigger player counts, it's going to be these games where no matter how many people are playing, you're all taking your turn at the same time, so it doesn't matter. It could be 100 people, cartographers, Coloma. I know I mentioned this last week because I was playing it with BJ, but that's a game where, like, in my opinion, you want to have more people because it has to do with if I go to the same spot as someone else and something different's going to happen and you're trying to math out and psychology out what they're going to be doing, if there's only one other player, like, you're not going to have the fun of that. But at the same time, after we pick where we go, we pretty much just action at the same time, so it didn't add extra time. I think that's a big thing that can make playing with more people better.
Well, so I think I mentioned it. I didn't do a full review yet because I only played it the one time. But Quaxquillenberg, most of the game you're doing simultaneous actions.
Yep.
You're filling your pot and doing it quick, and that speeds up play time. And I think that's another thing too. Is like I think it would be it's hard. I'll give the game publishers a bit of an escape. It's hard to play test enough at all the various player counts to know exactly how long a game should last. But I think it would be interesting if you had like statistics of like. At 2 players, the game plays in 45 minutes. At 3 players, like they give a range. The game plays in 60 to 120 minutes. Okay, well, is that for, depending on what player count, right? BGG doesn't do it either, where you break down games of, if I play this game with 5 players, it averages out to 2 hours. If I play it at whatever, it's an hour and 30. And then you can look at it and see, is there an exponential nature to the gameplay? Because if it's 15 minutes per, say it's 30 minutes per player, so four players is 2 hours. If you add a 5th player, is it just 2.5 hours or is it 3 hours?
Right, and that's a good point. It could be exponential.
That would make a huge difference if I play it. Like if you add a 5th player and it only adds an extra 30 minutes, okay, great. Then it's 30 minutes per player. But if it adds another hour because it's really now it's pushing 35 or 40 minutes per player, I think that'd be interesting to see. But it's so hard to do that, right? Because I mean, you'd have to have like hundreds of different play tests with different groups of people.
Right. There's so many variables.
There's so many variables, but that brings into like the idea of like how like Stonemaier Games for Tapestry has been tracking all the plays, right? And they're putting out updating the scoring for the different factions, right? I think they're called factions, right?
Civilizations.
Civilizations. There we go. Civilizations in Tapestry. That wouldn't be an interesting thing if people there's probably thousands of people that use BG Stats as an app. If there was a way to collate all that data of playtime, what game, how many player count, and then you could, have a database somewhere that had all that, that would be kind of interesting just to, the nerd in me, like Carlos always talks about.
But to get to that scale, you have to do what you're saying and use the community, which means the game's going to have to be released first.
Right, yeah. So you have to kind of update it later. But I think that's, once you get to 5 or 6 is always a problem for me. I think once I can handle, I have plenty of games that play 2, whether they're designed for 2 or just good at 2, right? I have tons of games for 3 and 4. It's that 5 and 6 that get to be tricky, right? Because
that's when you got to bust out your roll and rice, flip and fills, stuff like that.
Yeah, because it's almost like at that point you're not quite big enough for the big party games. Right.
2 Rooms and a Boom or something
2 Rooms
like
and a Boom or Werewolf or Blood on the Clock Tower or even just other big party games, like Ready, Set, Bet is probably, 5 or 6 is probably pretty good.
Now, one that this is the only game I'll ever say I want to have the max player count, and that is Captain Sonar. I would love, it's so much, it's perfect at 8. 6 is okay, but 8 just for that themey feel of everybody has their own role.
Yeah. 6 is okay because there's 2 roles that could combine because they're not as easy as the others. But But yeah, no. But five and six is always the biggest problem. That's what I have a buddy's game, and normally it's just four of us. It's my buddy and his wife and me and another guy. We get together, we play four. But every now and then, my friend will bring one of his daughters. He's got 3 daughters, and it's like, so I'll pack all these games like for 4 that are perfect for 4 players. We'll get there, and then he shows up and he brings his college age daughter, who's a great gamer. But then it's like, God damn it, now we got 5. I did not bring enough games.
Yeah.
It's so that's always a big thing too. Is like if in your mindset you've prepared a game day and you've brought games that are perfect for the player count, and then what happens if that player count gets thrown off? Then it kind of gets a little weird with how do you change that, right?
Right. One thing that I just thought of, because we're kind of talking about these two sides. What do you think you would prefer? So let's take a game. Okay, Zaya. Have you played Zaya?
No, I have not.
Okay. Well, I'll just use that example anyway, because I can't think of another one off the top of my head. Okay, Zaya is a game that says it cannot be played with less than 3 players. You have to have 3. Then you have a game, let's say, Dune. You can play at 2, but then you have to be upkeeping throughout the whole round. What do you prefer? Would you prefer to be limited to only 3? Or if you're playing with less than 3, you have to be a computer and update the board? What do you think you prefer?
I would prefer to be limited. Just say this game is at 3 instead of having a bot. Now, if you play it, like I said, if we play it 2, but we're covering spaces, it's fine.
Right.
But upkeep
like
during the
Arnak.
game, Arnak. Upkeep during a game for a third player, a third bot is just usually I'd rather just find a different game to play at that point. I mean, I'll play it if I have to, but I would choose something else.
I wonder, from a publishing standpoint, I'm sure they'd prefer something like Dune, because Zaya, I love that game. My game group loves that game, but it's just like, it has to be the right player count or you just can't play it. And so we don't play it that often. We definitely play Dune more often. But yeah, I think I would prefer just to be limited as well.
Yeah. So this is slightly off topic. I want to bring this up because you have to check it out. But so this giant push for solo gaming too is really big. And I think, the pandemic probably really hit a lot of that because people are stuck at home. And if they were the only gamer in their house, they got to figure out a way to game, right? So right now on the BGG hotness, and it's been number 1 for like the last 2 or 3 days, is Mr. President, the American Presidency, 2001 to 2020. It's a GMT game that has a weight of 4.14 out of 5.
Oh my gosh.
And it's a only 1-player game. It's a solo-only game. And when you when you look at the pictures of the game board, it takes up a 4x6 table. An entire 4x6 table for a solo game. This looks ridiculous.
How have I not heard of this? That's crazy.
I think it just came out. Maybe let's see what's the release. Yeah, but if you look at it, 2023, so it just came out. So, but this looks like the campaign in North Africa, right? That game that's supposed to take 1,800 hours to play or something like that. Some crazy long time period. But if you just look at the pictures of the thing, the game board takes up a 4x6 table, and it's a solo game with a 4.14 rating.
It sounds like you're making this up, like you're trying to make a joke, set up a punchline. That's crazy.
Right. But it's not. Yeah, and it's been on the hotness now for BGG, number 1 on the hotness for several days. So that means that maybe it's a self-fulfilling prophecies. I'm talking about it, so you're going to go check on
exactly.
it, click on it, so it keeps in the hotness. But it's like, how does this GMT solo game with over a 4 weight, and we know it's probably closer to a full 5 weight because everyone on BGG is the Uber gamers who weight it. This game's not that heavy. It's kind of light, whatever. Insane. 1-player game. A 360 to 600 minute time period, play time.
That's ridiculous. I got to look into this.
Yeah, it's like, all right, you know what? But again, it's a solo game, so I'm never going to play this game.
I also don't like the title. It just makes me think of...
Oh, it's a crazy long game, right?
Yeah.
Mr. President, the American Presidency. Mr. President is a solitary game about governing as President of the United States. It's not an election game. It begins that you've been elected and you're sitting in the chair trying to advance your agenda and navigating the ongoing crisis, political enemies, public opinion, your relations with Congress and the press.
This board is ridiculous. I'm looking at the pictures. It's so big. There's so much.
And it's so busy. There's a million little pieces, chits stacked on top of each other and stuff. I'm like, but it's GMT, right? So it is what it is.
Of course.
Right? It's a niche market. But again, you talk about player time. So if you're a solo gamer and you play games by yourself, something like this, it's going to take you a day to play, right?
If that's your niche, I guess, yeah.
That's your niche. Or would you rather play games where there's a solo variant that is not very good, right? I mean, this game is clearly designed, and this is like a huge fringe example, but a game that is designed for solo play, and I'll throw a better one out, Final Girl, which everybody that's played it just loves it, right? Designed for solo only, and it's selling well. Would you rather play something like that, or would you rather play a game like Dune where you can play it solo, but then you just got to use a companion app to basically run a second player anyway?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a solo player, but I might be a solo player in that situation in games like this, because the thing that's always turned me off, like I said before, solo variants, whenever I'm looking at this in the rulebook, it looks very dissimilar from the actual play of the game, because the games oftentimes are so reliant on that player interaction.
Yeah, and I think that's where I'm at too. Like I kind of regret not picking up Final Girl now, because I'm not a big solo gamer. Right? My biggest problem is, I'm sure you're gonna shake your head and is I want to play a game solo. I'll take it out, I'll set it up, spend 15, 20, 30 minutes setting it up, and then I'll just go, nah, and I'll just pack it back up. Because
I think it takes a particular mindset. So, like, my wife, she likes games all right, but she doesn't like people. So she wants to be able to play games and be antisocial at the same time. And she'll tell you that. I'm not, like, trying to roast her or anything. So she'll play some of my games solo that I just like, I played, what was it? At Gen Con, I mean, this is going back a couple years, but they had Under Falling Skies from CGE. It's basically like Space Invaders, the video game, as a board game.
Yep.
And it was like cool, but I was like, I'll just go play Space Invaders. You know, I'd rather be playing a video game of this.
And I think it's similar. Like kind of a difference between my wife and I is like doing this podcast, doing the show, going to conventions, and game days for me is recharging. I'm an extrovert that gets recharged by social interaction, by getting out there. Whereas my wife, who is a trained theater person and is a fantastic, stage manager and actress and singer, that is her expending energy. And like when she does that kind of stuff, or when she goes to conferences or goes to game days, she's expending energy, having a great time doing it. But then afterwards, she's like, I'm just going to go play a game by myself, right? And I'll just go play Slay the Spire, and because then that alone time and being away from everybody is a recharge. So it kind of also depends on, I guess, on who you are. I think I would venture to say that a lot of people who are heavily into solo games are not very extroverted individuals, which is fine. It's who you are, right? And so I've tried to play. I've played some games this year. I've probably played a half dozen or more solo games, just because I think I use solo games more to learn how to play the game, so that when I take it to the game day, I already know how to play. I might set up a game and run through the solo variant, or play two-player. Two-handed, and just kind of do the Rado thing where I'm pretending to be somebody else just to kind of learn how to play the game. But yeah, so that's why for me, that 3-4-5 range is probably the best for games, because that means I'm playing with other people.
Yep. I think that kind of wraps us up. Any other final closing thoughts you have on that topic, Wayne?
No, I just when this drops, hopefully that game is still number one on hotness, and everyone goes and clicks and sees the ridiculousness of Mr. President.
That's great. Well, before we wrap up, let's just go ahead and say, make sure you guys tune in on Thursday nights to the Call-In Show. Yep. Call in, talk about whatever you want. Board gaming, you can take over. That's on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern. Southern Board Game Festival, grab your badges. That's in October here in Louisiana. Anything else going on that people need to know about, Wayne?
No, we're less than this time next week, or no, less than 24 hours from now. This will drop on Wednesday. Sorry, spitting that
Good
out.
Point.
So
that it will be a week. Yeah,
this will be 1 week from the time when all of the Beans and Ice crew, except for Mitchell, will be at the Dice Tower East.
What day are you going to the con? Are you going Wednesday?
I will be going over Wednesday morning. I think they said you can start picking up a badge at like 8 a.m. So my goal is to be on the road by like 6. So I'm out there by 7:30, 7:45. I'll kind of quasi check into the hotel, and then just go right, and then boom, I'm gaming. Starting the game.
Cool. Yep. I hope you guys have fun. If we I guess we need to record definitely before you leave that day, because otherwise we are not going to have time while you're at the con to record.
Yeah, probably not. Yeah. Well, we could. I mean, Tuesday, the 4th of July, I'm going to be around, so we could record then, or even that Monday. I'm technically working Monday, but no one's going to be in the office, so I'll be able to record too. So.
Yeah, I wish I could be there with you guys. I'm already looking into next year. I went last year, and I went to the retreat the year before that, so I'm missing out this year, but. At some point, you got to stop spending money on board games, at least for a little while.
Yeah, that's
and that counts, even though it's not a board game on my shelf. It's definitely money in the realm of board games. But next time I think I'll be there again. And of course, with our track record, you probably won't be if I'm going.
Probably won't. Actually, I think next year I might be in. I think we're doing a trip to Japan next year. So.
Oh, great.
Well,
anyway.
We'll
you
figure it
guys,
out.
thanks for listening. Give us your feedback on player count and what your preferences are. I'm Mitchell,
And I'm Wayne.
and this is the Beans and Dice Podcast, a podcast about
How we game.
Take It Easy.
Thanks for watching the Beans and Dice podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe.